Hello everyone and welcome to Cavalier Studios. And yes, today is going to be a little different than what I usually do. Usually on this channel I share my opinions on films or even providing short films I've written and directed. Well, today I will be doing a minor comparison between the Left Behind films and which versions are closer to the books themselves. If you're not familiar with the Left Behind books, it's okay, because I'll tell you a little bit about them. The Left Behind series consists of 16 books in total, with 14 being the major storyline and 2 being prequels. The Rising, Antichrist is Born, and The Regime, Evil Advances. All 16 major books were written by Tim Lahaye and Jerry B. Jenkins, and published starting in 1995 until 2007. The books and films were about the end of the world in a span of about 7 years, with references that are found or can be found in the Bible. The main storyline follows 4 main characters, whom are Rayford Steele, Chloe Steele, Buck Williams, and the Antichrist, Nikolai Carpathia. Now, there isn't really complexity into describing Nikolai, as he's just that. He's the Antichrist, an individual who seats himself at the head of the one world government, outlawing Christianity, Bibles, and creates a one world currency. Besides him, of course, Rayford Steele is a pilot who emotionally cheats on his Christian wife, Irene Steele, with his flight stewardess, Hattie Durham. Now, don't get me wrong, he eventually changes his character into being more God representative. He believes in God, he changed his beliefs, and he understands that of his faults. He, of course, has 2 kids, both Chloe, whom, like him, is not taken up by God during the rapture, but you also have Rami, which, like his mother, Irene, is taken up to heaven, as both, in a way, are born-again Christians. Buck Williams, on the other hand, is an aggressive journalist who teeters on believing in God and ultimately chooses facts over believing. That is, of course, until he meets Rayford and eventually marries Rayford's daughter, Chloe. Now, before the marriage of Chloe, of course, he becomes a child of God and a believer, but regardless, though, in the bigger portion of the beginning of the films and the books, he's not a true believer. So now let's go into the compare and contrast. The first Left Behind film came out in 2000, with the sequel Left Behind Tribulation Force in 2002. And the final film, Left Behind World at War, in 2005, which that one got a little bit more of a budget. Obviously, I'll go into detail a little bit more, but the first film was directed by Vic Sarin. Tribulation Force was directed by Bill Corcoran. The third, World at War, was directed by Craig Bailey. The writers for the first film was Alan B. McElroy, Paul Lalonde, Joe Goodman. The second, of course, Tribulation Force, that one was written by John Paitis. Yeah, let's go with Paitis. Paul Lalonde, Jerry B. Jenkins. Yes, one of the actual co-writers to the book series. The third film is, of course, Gene Brinko, Paul Duran, and once again, Jerry B. Jenkins. The films mainly star Kirk Cameron as Buck Williams, Brad Johnson as Rayford Steele, Janaea Stevens as Chloe Steele, Gordon Curry as Nikolai Carpathia, Chelsea Noble as Hattie Durham, and now Bruce Barnes. He is a major character, and of course the first 2 books kind of sets the good path for Rayford, Chloe, and Buck, but in the movies he's actually replaced as an actor in the third film. Now with this flick, the first one, you can clearly see that it's an early 2000s film, and a little bit for Tribulation Force 2. That doesn't really hold up to modern movies today. I say this because there are other Christian films like Passion of the Christ, which came out 4 years later, that clearly holds up to this day. Now, I do understand that the budget wasn't as supported as Passion, but regardless, though, you honestly get my drift. The film, though, tries really hard to grasp the important sequences from the book and puts it on the big screen. However, while doing so, it kind of misses quite a few important pieces. The perfect example is the fact that Buck doesn't actually meet Chloe until the last, maybe third of the book. Buck also introduces Hattie to Nikolai, which is how she gets the job within his corporation. The Buck in this film goes more towards Christianity than the other three films, meaning, of course, he goes more towards Christianity than the one that we are introduced in with Nicolas Cage as well as Kevin Sorbo. So with a little bit of hard journalism, but he also gets extremely close with Nikolai as correctly depicted in the books. I did have an issue, though, with how Hattie and Rayford had more of a physical relationship in the films, as it shows them kissing on the plane rather than just an emotional one that's written in the book. The book clearly states many, many times how Rayford never did anything with Hattie, but still regrets having emotional feelings towards her. Also, Buck is friends with Rayford and Chloe right at the start of the film, which he ends up spending the night in their house the night of the event. Something that doesn't actually really happen in the book. Also, Hattie is the one that introduces Buck and Rayford at the airport. Again, this is the last third of the book, or the book, which is actually the same time Chloe and Buck meet and ends up having kind of like a close relationship, kind of this starting point of a friendship leading to much more. The second film doesn't really add much, only the fact of further character development and the sequence at the Wailing Wall with the two witnesses, Eli and Morsha. That I am not too positive if it did happen in the book or not. It may have. Honestly, I don't quite remember, because as of right now, I'm on book 4, which is Soul Harvest, in a span of honestly a few months. So, not to mention that Bruce Barnes doesn't die by the end of this film, and he does in the book. In the book, he actually is part of, I think he's in the hospital or something, and the hospital gets bombed. The third film you can honestly skip. Barely anything is book related, and Bruce Barnes isn't even the same actor, like I said. They've replaced him at this point. It mainly focuses on the President of the United States and his relationship with Rayford, more so with Rayford and Buck. As they call themselves the Tribulation Force, which is, of course, Rayford, Chloe, Buck, and was once Bruce Barnes. The end of the film, though, is always the heavy hitter. Nikolai, of course, has a council meeting where he manipulates everybody's mind to believe that Jonathan Stonegold went crazy, shot his friend, and then turned around unaliving himself. When this film was done, it doesn't do a decent job at depicting the horror and manipulation, but then you have Buck Williams trying to be the hero, saying someone has to stop this, and stands up. But in the book, this honestly doesn't happen. Prior to the meeting, he prays to God, and during this horrific sequence, he's frozen in fear, but God helps him by not allowing the Antichrist to mind warp him into believing everything Nikolai is honestly saying. Instead, he sees the truth of Nikolai committing those crimes, those heinous crimes. So again, this sequence is very important to the first book, and the way that it's depicted is good for that time period, but they don't really show the horror element, the fearfulness that the Antichrist has on these individuals. Now we get into the first reboot of the Left Behind series, which came out in 2014. This was directed by Vic Armstrong. The writer was Paul Lalonde, John Paitis again, and then the other actual co-author of the book series, Tim Lahaye. It does star Nicolas Cage as Rayford Steele, Leah Thompson as Irene Steele, Cassie Thompson as Chloe Steele, and honestly, the 2000s heartthrob, Chad Michael Murray as Buck Williams. You do have Nikki Whelan as Hattie Durham. And weirdly enough, you have Jordan Sparks as Shasta Carville, Major Dodson as Raimi Steele, and one of the main things that keep the audiences at the edge of their seat is, of course, when a story has a protagonist. And unfortunately, this film doesn't have that. Nikolai, the Antichrist, isn't in this film, though he's the main protagonist in the whole book series. Additionally, this film primarily takes place during Rayford Steele and Buck Williams' flight coming back to the United States on their way to Europe during the rapture. Of course, they do a U-turn because people vanish, they don't have a lot of gas, but I will give the film credit, though. Unlike the previous 3 films, we actually get to see Raimi and Irene Steele. I feel this is very important only because of the fact that it brings so much more gravity to that film of both Chloe and Rayford's relationship with his wife and his son. Chloe, on the other hand, has such a closeness to her younger brother, and when he is raptured at the mall, this showcases the impact that it has on her. Also, people and how they would react when this would happen or will happen with the looting and the rioting and overall panic. The relationship between Hattie and Rayford is a little bit better, honestly, than the previous films. It's more of an emotional connection, but unlike the book, Hattie doesn't know that Rayford is married in this film. In the book, she does. The dialogue in the film, too, in some cases are almost straight word from the book, which is nice, except that Chloe and Buck, once again, meet in the beginning of the plot rather than close to the end. The 2 biggest issues I do have with the storyline is that there are characters that aren't even in the book, aka Jordan Sparks' character, and if they are, then honestly, they're not really covered. So the other thing is the fact that Chloe thinks that she is the only surviving person. Of course, this is close to the end. And so only surviving person in her family, and almost unalives herself by jumping off the top of the bridge onto oncoming traffic. Something that is realistic, which I get, but completely polar opposite of her character in the books. Lastly, the second reboot of Left Behind, Rise of the Antichrist, this was released in 2023. The director was Kevin Sorbo. The writers was Paul Lalonde, Stuart Bentley, and John Paitis, which I get John Paitis has written a few of them, or in the previous one, but one thing that you guys will notice is the 2 actual authors of the book series is no longer part of it. And I did do the research, and unfortunately with this, they aren't even producers. So this film does star Kevin Sorbo as Rayford Steele, Sarah Fisher as Chloe Steele, Bailey Chase as Nikolai Carpathia, Catherine Kuhut as Hattie, Neil McDonough as Jonathan Stonegold, Lance E. Nichols as Buck Williams. Now, I don't have too much to say about this film as I did do a review when it first came out, so I'll go ahead and add that little tag at the top. So if you're interested, you can check it out. Just be mindful, as it was way before how the background looks now. Overall, this film takes place probably at the tail end of the actual book. Buck and Chloe have already met and have this friend, almost boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. The Antichrist is already making moves to make it to the top, basically the ruler of the world. Also, Jonathan Stonegold has created a social media platform, and not really what he's done in the book, which is trying to get his hands on the chemically engineered fertilizer created by Chaim Rosenzweig that produces crops in areas like the desert. I will give it up for how they depicted Buck in this film, though. Honestly, the straight to the point, only wanting the facts and not stopping until he gets the truth. Buck Williams reminds me more of the character from the book than the other 2 films did. He does get religious and saved at the end, but the charismatic essence showcases with the overall performance that the actor does. So top-notch as far as the performance. Sadly, though, this film falters on many plot points pointing towards what's considered conspiracy theories. Though a lot of conspiracy theories have been proven true, this film really drives them to the point, really drives them to the ground where it kind of gets to the point of, yeah, I get it. The other thing, too, is that many shots in this film look as though they got it from like a stock website where you just have to download the video itself. Like a lot of the writing video sequences where people are watching the TV. So like when you're sitting in front of the TV, you see them, like if they're looking at you. A lot of that, it just seems very stockish. Like if they, once again, went to the website and grabbed it. I feel like this film, though, truly showcases the true horror as it is depicted in the book, and mainly so at the end with Nikolai and everybody in the room. The fear and overall evil essence of Nikolai is truly felt in this film, so kudos to that. But the verdict, honestly, is quite clear. I get that the overall message is God, the Bible, and the end times as it should. However, the book itself doesn't really hold up when it comes to describing modern technology, which, I kind of get. And a lot of the films, they try to make it more modern to today's audiences. Unlike The Shining, where it talks about old technology, but it's not supposed to take place in the future, like how the Left Behind series is. I feel like the overall placement of these stories are told to be in the future, but the descriptiveness of the technology draws it back, unfortunately, back to the early 2000s. The authors shouldn't have really been as descriptive, in my opinion, and let the imagination work more in its favor. The other thing, too, is that Chloe's conversations with Buck just honestly makes me feel like she's either still a child. Like, I get that she's college-based, like 21, 22, but even then, it makes me feel like she belongs in the 70s. Again, the writings in this book, as you'll see, or have read, doesn't really hold up, and it's a shame. Regardless, though, the true message is what I was originally saying: God, the Bible, and the biblical end times. Again, that was clearly the message, whether if it's the book or the movie. Not so much the descriptiveness. That's honestly just my personal opinion about it. But with that said, though, I truly believe that the original Left Behind films are more true to the actual books than the others. I get that there are faults, but if I were talking true to the actual book, yes, there is a little plot points that you can nitpick and things that, they left out, but the original with Kirk Cameron is more close than the other two. However, in my personal opinion, again, you guys should honestly just skip the third. You don't need to watch that. Just the first two and you'll be fine. So honestly, here's my pitch though, what I will pitch to you guys, and you can agree with it, you cannot, that's perfectly fine. Just leave your comments and how you would make this a little bit better, but here it goes. I honestly think that they should do a TV series of this. Angel Studios should be the forefront of creating it. They've done so well with The Chosen that I feel like they can clearly hit this out of the ballpark. Also, start with The Rising. When listening to the audiobook, I couldn't help picture a mix between Rosemary's Baby and a thriller film, honestly. You can easily make this very much of a horror element to it, but keep it the overall message, the Christianity type film. Just understanding how the Antichrist becomes to be just gives all the occult vibes, and if it's done correctly, it'll honestly pull a lot of people to it. But let me know what you guys do think. Do you agree or disagree with me? And regardless of which direction you feel, let me know by leaving a comment down below. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and follow us on all social platforms. And I'll catch you guys next time.